Um, I think I did the thing. Okay. Do you want to do, I will, now we're all friends here, but do you want to do a formal introduction of who you are, Josue?
Well, hello. My name is Josue Morales, and I'm the founder and director of Los Volcanes Coffee in Antigua, Guatemala. And we're gonna be hosting this recording here today from a farm called Finca El Pintal, which is a very special farm, which is like right at the outskirts of the town. That's where it starts. And I'm gonna show you a little bit of the work we've been doing, and especially the real work. That's how I like to call it. Everything that happens once the harvest is over.
Well, I'm excited. So do you want to start with the tour and then we could go on to the questions and stuff?
Well, I don't know if you have like some initial questions that might be just easier to
Yeah,
answer before we get into the context of showing everything else.
totally. Well, I'm very inspired by the work that Los Volcanes has been doing in Guatemala. Do you want to talk a little bit how you came about starting this company and developing everything you've developed with it? Talk a little bit about your role, which is also like you wear 10 hats basically, right?
But not anymore lately, you know.
Okay.
Fortunately, that's one thing that's changed in my life. You know, I was gonna mess with you. I was gonna start like once upon a time there was Richard Ford.
Okay. Once
But
upon a
no,
time.
no, Richard comes in later into the story.
Oh yeah.
But well, um, where to start? I'd say at the beginning. So I've been in coffee for it's gonna be 18 years this year. Guess I can call myself a coffee adult now. uh,
You can drink.
yeah, I started in 2003 by happenstance. I think that's the norm for everyone in coffee, I guess, unless you were born into it. And I was studying in university, finishing my first semester, when there was this opportunity from my faculty to join a mission from United Nations to go to a community in northern Huehuetenango. Back then, Guatemala still had many communities that were suffering the post-Civil War consequences. So they required a presence in order to reorganize the structure of society and you know the fabric of how they interact and elect. Now that we have a democracy for these people that are living out there. And long story short, I ended up spending 6 months there. And upon coming back to Guatemala City, I brought back with me my first bag of coffee because that's what the community did. They farmed coffee. And then I figured I had to get it milled and get it roasted before I could do anything with it. And then I thought it would be a good idea. And eventually, I stuck with working mainly with producers since the beginning because they were the only ones that were willing to sell me a few bags of coffee at a time and the only ones that were willing to give me credit. So that was kind of important. And I started as a roaster. I had a small roaster in Guatemala City dedicated to service mainly the hospitality business, restaurants and hotels. And eventually, by 2010, it had grown to be one of the largest ones in Guatemala. I was roasting about 22 to 25,000 pounds of coffee a month. And at that point, I had already created the lab, which is the core of this company to this day. And the lab came as a curiosity and as a necessity to understand how and why if I was receiving coffee from the same farm, was it having different variations from one bag to another, from one month to another, from one season to another. And that's how the system kind of was born. The core idea was to be able, through a sensory and seed analysis, to pinpoint how the decisions that these producers were taking were affecting the overall result in the cup, depending as well on their varietal and the cycle of their farm. And so all of that took form. And towards 2011, I opened the first lab that was focused. The lab has always been focused to servicing the producer, so that's another thing. The export part of it came till later, when started receiving visits from people that had heard about us, but we weren't exactly set up to be an exporter. That sort of happened on the way. And so that started in 2011. Back then it was called TG Lab. And in 2018, it became Los Volcanes, because I was finally able to move everything here to Antigua, the lab, and myself included. So with the opportunity to consolidate all of our projects under one roof, that's where the name Los Volcanes comes from. And if we were at our main farm, which is La Esperanza, which is, well, right next door, basically, you would understand why the name, because from our lab and from our drying patio, we see the three volcanoes that surround Antigua with a very spectacular view. So that's kind of, 17, 18 years in a nutshell. So
Awesome. So you talked a little bit about the lab. That's you started with that to help support producers. How do you do that? Like, what are the different? I know we're going to see some of the facets of the projects you have going on, but how do you collect data and convey data, and like what different kind of projects do you balance to help support all of that?
So the reality now is much different, because well, before it was a matter of trust, and we were building a supply chain. And now that we work with so many roasters all over the world, and the ideas have taken hold, the fact that that I was able to come to direct La Esperanza, which was a mill that was already built, that was basically idle for most of its capacity. And I took over management of this facility, and that's where everything really became more real, if you will. Because all of a sudden I was sitting on the biggest installed capacity in the region, and I was able to bring to a centralized processing location the work, the harvest of hundreds, if not thousands of people from the radius that we cover, which is about 80 miles around us. We have 18 receiving stations that come down from the volcanoes and the mountains. And that changed everything. And I would rather like to concentrate on that and how it works now, rather than how it evolved. And in that sense, there was one thing, because we were already, regardless of how we were purchasing or who we were selling this coffee to, if we were trading it at all, we were already providing feedback to the farms we were working with out of the cupping assessment of every single day lot. But that had its limitations, especially in terms of the commitment that we could have as an emerging exporter in how we were going to allocate this coffee. But as we grew, and the roasters that we were working with since the beginning grew as well, we were able to secure the funding, credit lines here in Guatemala, so that we could actually pay the coffee as it's coming in, which, in my opinion, and at large, liquidity might be the most single important factor in the whole supply chain. So the way that we interact now with a producer is that, basically, if you're a producer that is part of our program, we know where you are. We know, the exact conditions of your farm. We have a diagnosis of how many trees you have, how many shade trees you have. And we will commit based on that to purchase 100% of your harvest no matter what. Now, since you're part of that program and you're not subject to the market volatility, you have a fixed price almost 6 months prior to the start of harvest, we do require that as part of that commitment on our side, which is a big financial debt, that you will align to the programs of our agronomy and to the programs of the lab, which ultimately will provide feedback to you in terms that will allow you to take decisions. So, for example, when we're evaluating coffee, we don't use any of the protocols that you're familiar with. I've developed our own system because it's made to interpret the work coming out of a farm. It's not made to interpret a sample as is on the table.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're cupping coffee, say we have a certain astringency when the cup is at around 70 degrees Celsius, it means that we're like 12, 13 minutes into the cupping, and you feel an astringency and the acidity in the frontal part, and more than likely means that we screwed up in the drying, because that astringency comes from a very aggressive drying. But once we get past, for example, the fact that okay, the cup is clean, the acidity profile is clean, there's nothing wrong with the processing, and then there happens to be, for example, a certain kind of bitterness in the mouthfeel towards lower temperatures, which is tied to solubility, which is tied to how dense your coffee is in green, which is tied to how dense your cherries were. And that, all of the combinations of that data that we're collecting on a daily basis and all that analysis will allow us to come back to you as a producer and tell you, listen, from this day lot, from this specific lot, we have the situation. We have this inconsistency in the cups. The variation of the screens that compose this lot are different to the others. Was there anything that happened different in that lot? Did you prune differently? Is it, did you not get enough rain or a different rain pattern? Is it a different sector? Did you not take shade out on time? So those are a series of hypotheses that the system has become very good at answering. And especially once anyone from our team or myself set foot on a farm, we're not working blindly. So we know exactly what to focus on with a very limited amount of time to direct to each producer now that we have such a large supply chain, and come up with answers that we can correct towards the next year, that we can amend in the soil, that we can just take action on and understand how the impact of that is going to affect the cup in the next cycle.
Cool. When you say you have like a different protocol, not like an SCA score, and it helps you identify very specifically like flavor attributes and what it could be traced to. What does that look like for data collection? And like, obviously, it sounds like you go to the producer and tell them like what the issue is, but how do you, is it a cupping form? Is it like
yes, it's a cupping form. Just the priorities that you assign to the different attributes is different.
Yeah.
Because when we're in harvest and at the stage in which we're tasting the coffee, we seldom ever get to taste what you guys taste when the coffee lands. Because we're tasting a coffee that's not finished. We're tasting a coffee that's not settled. We're tasting a coffee that, because of the way we dry it, because of the way we treat it, it is made so that it doesn't start really revealing itself till about 4 to 6 months into the future, so that it has a longer shelf life. So we don't actually concentrate on flavor and describing and descriptors. That is like really meaningless to us, because it doesn't contribute to the value of the product. So in our protocol, which by the way has a name, I call it the structural protocol to analyze coffee, because we go based on a structure. And the structure starts with the cup being clean. So if it's clean, you can move forward. And then it depends on where you are. In Guatemala, we take acidity as the main backbone of a coffee. So acidity is what provides the structure. And based on that acidity, we interpret many things. If the acidity is clean, sweetness for us is how sweet that acidity is, not sweetness by itself. If it does present a certain acidity type, like if it's citric, tartaric, malic, then we allocate that in terms of how intense it is. That's how we grade flavor. And mouthfeel is how that sweetness is going to be felt in my palate and with what intensity. So that by itself and being able to interpret coffee that way allows us to know if even within the same farm, certain day lots can go together. If it's a regional blend, will it present eventually the terroir that the version of that terroir that we're trying to be the proponents of. So it's a very different way of understanding it and utilizing aspects of taste for the purpose of creating this profile.
That's awesome. I'm curious also, so it's interesting when you have results other than what you expect and you're going back to the producer and it's a weather issue. It just happens that like there was a lot more rain this year and that probably was the cause for the change in the coffee. Are there ways that you adjust other factors on a farm to compensate for weather challenges?
Well,
sorry, I realize it's like a complex one.
There's one thing that you can't really do anything about. And by the way, I'm gonna start moving away from here. But before I move away from here, I just want to show you what these guys are doing because it's pretty important.
Totally.
So, so for those of you who are joining, this is what the farm looks like, and this is part of the work we're doing right now. And what these guys are doing is that we're turning the soil so that it doesn't become compact, and it's more.
Josue, can you zoom in a little bit more?
Yeah, let me get closer.
Thank you.
Jóvenes, buenas tardes. Ahí los están viendo de todo el mundo. Mostrame ahí cómo le picas la tierra.
Are these the same trees we were looking at earlier? Oh, you can't hear me right now. Wait a minute. Are you talking to us? Because we can barely hear you. It sounds a little bit like you're in a fishbowl. I don't know. Can anyone else hear very well? Okay.
Maybe with the signal. Can you hear me now?
Oh yes, there you are.
Okay. It's just a very picky signal, I guess.
Well, we were hearing the raking really well.
Okay, so but you weren't listening to my explanation.
No, we missed the explanation, or at least
so
I did.
What the raking that you're seeing is that they're turning the soil. And we're doing this all around the farm because we're taking advantage of the fact that we haven't had rains yet. And so when the rain and the fertilization comes, the soil is going to be more readily available to absorb it. So it's a work that we do so that the soil doesn't become compact, and because our fertilization project is based out of microorganisms that are going to, we're basically injecting additional life to the soil.
Mm-hmm.
So if the soil is too compact, that limits the fertility of the soil and how much microorganisms can aid the root system of the plant in feeding itself. So I was showing you that because, you know, the rains are coming. I don't know the food because the other thing I was telling you is that all of our plants, all these little buds that you can see flower. And a flower is one of them here.
We're losing you again.
Okay, you're losing me again. How about here?
A little better.
Little better. Okay. Give me a second. Hey, porfa.
Ooh,
Qué
there you are.
inoportuno es.
I don't know what you did, but it's very loud and very clear now.
I think it's the microphone.
Ah, okay.
But because it's okay. Okay. Well, so I was telling you, it's about to flower. It's gonna be our second flowering, and we're right on time to do all this. And you see all this rubbish on the floor. That's from opening up the shade. So we have that ready. Like for example, this side has been deshaded. This side has not been. So you can see like the sharp contrast from one side to the other.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, you know, to allow mainly the sunlight to come in, which is one of the factors that will allow health of the soil. It's going to allow the trees to flower, and it's going to also prevent diseases with the excess of accumulation of moisture. So a lot of the real work comes now. The harvesting is the easy part.
So the tending to the trees and clearing the soil. Are these the trees you were talking about earlier that have 100-year-old roots that you stumped and regrowth?
So look at the root system.
Mm-hmm.
And then we stumped this 2 years ago. We've been waiting 2 years for them to finally get to the stage where you see them, for them to produce again.
It looks very green and lush.
Yeah.
Well, it's important that you mention that because this estate, along with La Esperanza, we run the only 2 organic certified farms in the region. And, you know, I think you can tell, and as we walk, you're going to be able to see it better, but we don't have leaf rust, which is something that it's a Bourbon. And as I was saying, it's a very old Bourbon of that. And it's in very healthy shape. And that has to do with part of the things that we've been developing as a company, which, you know, we spent quite a while right now speaking about our lab and the sensory analysis, but over the years, the agronomic companionship has had to evolve hand in hand with cupping if the ideas were to take hold. So as much as we've been developing on understanding coffee from a different tasting perspective, we've been able to create a companionship for that in terms of what we recommend for producers to apply on the soil and how they need to manage their farms, specifically without burdening them with the cost of chemicals and with the effect of chemicals. So this is proof that it works.
This is a farm that's part of your compost program as well?
We're going there right now. So
yeah, we're gonna go see the worms.
And then after that, I'm gonna hand over the phone to Stephanie in a bit, so that we can show you properly. But we're walking towards there right now.
Yeah, and for those that don't know, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, but I rarely see trees that are that green. Usually I see some, I mean, not necessarily things wrong with the coffee trees, but more yellow or spots of some sort, whether it's Roya or just potential for mold or...
and I'm just gonna show you here, but as you see, every tree, like even the branches that I thought weren't gonna produce, everything is gonna bear fruit. Absolutely everything. Look at this one.
That's awesome.
This one's gorgeous. So
this is the first year after stumping?
This is gonna be the first year, yes.
Yeah.
How are we with the stage of the flowering for where you would like it to be?
We're perfect.
Okay.
This is
Maybe go over the flowering just so, Bill and Jesse, maybe they can get a better idea of like why flowering exists, what it does, why is it important, briefly, if you don't mind.
well, the flowering is, out of every flower that you see here, that's gonna be one coffee cherry. So the flowering is very important because that's a guarantee that we will have harvest. And the thing about the flower and why it's so important to set the conditions for it is that coffee only flowers when it flowers. The flower only lasts for 2 days. So it's like this, and by the time it opens, it's gonna be in bloom for 1 day, and immediately the day after, it's gonna start drying. And if you don't have the right conditions of moisture in the soil and in the ambience, the flower won't stick and it won't become a fruit. And the same thing is if you have an imbalanced nutrition, the plant has two decisions, and that flower can either become more leaves or fruit. And how you incentivize that is by having the right nutrition in the soil present at the right time for the plant to know, okay, I can produce, I can create fruit, as opposed to just creating more leaves. So that's why flowering is so critical.
How do
And the
those
reason why
flowers? Oh, go
no,
ahead,
that's
Jeff.
okay.
Sorry.
The reason why I asked about timing is because that's obviously super important, because you don't want to have flowering too early or too late, because we do understand to some degree of the weather conditions of just experience or historical, where you should have, let's say, rainy, more rainy season in May, June, and July, so you can have better conditions
Yeah.
for the coffee.
Well, this year is kind of back to normal, I would say. For you to understand, like prior years, what we were facing is that we were having rains in January, February. So
Mm,
that meant the flower would come, because as soon as it gets rain, the flower comes. And that means that we're still harvesting, we're still picking coffee when it's flowering, and it messes up the metabolism of the plant. And as we finish picking, we drop the flowers, we compromise the future harvest,
right.
and we need to take off the whatever cherry we have left, because otherwise it's too much stress for the plant, and we won't have a good harvest neither now nor in the future. So that's decisions that need to be taken on a year on in the moment. But fortunately, this year, it seems like it's having a good cycle, and May is April, May are historicals for the flowering in this region, which is perfect. And all the flowering that you see here is going to be already our second flowering, which in prior years, well, last year I can tell you we had just one flowering.
Mm.
So we had a very small harvest, and this year, well, we've put in a lot of investment and a lot of work to actually see it the way that I'm showing it to you right now.
Can I ask one question?
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't want to go too far back, but when you were talking about the shading, is that shading done manually all the time? I had no idea. Like, you showed one side that was all cleared out, one side that was lush. As far as I knew, shading was a natural thing, but it sounded
No,
like you
you
manually
have
do it.
to manage it. It has to be. We actually speak about. Let me show you. Let me go back there again. So we talk about shade in percentages. So what you're seeing here is would be more appropriate like towards October, because this is probably like a 70% shade, which is a little too much for when we want the rains to come in. And let me get to the other part, which is where we want shade to be for the flowering. So this distribution would be, look at how it falls, over there is heavily shaded, over here it gets more of the sun. So this would be like more of like a 25, 30%, which is a healthy percentage for the time of the year we're in.
That's wild.
How do they cut down those? How do they cut it back? That looks like it's very high up there.
Ladders and structures and ¿cómo se dice motosierra? Chainsaws. Chainsaws.
We need a Zoom meeting of that.
Yeah.
I want to watch that.
Yeah. Well, it's not as fun as it sounds.
It would be a little bit hard on the ears, I think.
Yeah.
I was curious how the flowers smell, how intense the aroma is.
The flowers are amazing. It's unlike anything.
Yeah.
It's one of the most unique scents in the world, according to me. Hopefully to many others.
That's all that matters.
The reason I was only asking is I find it fascinating that the different varieties and different origins of coffee, the flowers seem to smell drastically different. Like a Typica in Hawaii versus a Typica in Honduras is just a massively different aroma.
Yes, it is.
Even though they're the same variety, and I can't figure out why.
Well, that would be a call in itself, you know. That would be a whole different subject.
Okay, we'll leave the flower thing on the shelf for later.
So, we're gonna go in here.
Oh, back to the composting facility.
Yeah. So this is where we keep the worms, but I'm gonna walk all the way to the back. So I was telling Zoe that we're actually harvesting today, which is perfect timing for you guys to see kind of how we manage these things. Each one of these is 15-meter long by a meter wide and a meter deep. As a milling facility, our byproduct in the year is nearly 8,000 metric tons of pulp in a harvest. So it's taken a while to decide how to do it, what to do, and this facility has been a learning stage. But I think we're making good progress. This became a whole different unit of the company actually, because now we produce a lot of soil that we are using in very different ways. So this is the rest. Quite a sizable
I feel like we
operation.
just walked a mile.
Not that much. So this is we start to see it. So in the baskets we already have the worms that we've taken out, and the rest is basically dirt that is ready to be harvested. Show you. Let's get all the way back here.
How do you measure in terms of how much soil to give someone basis the amount of hectares they have? Like, how does that fall into line with metrics?
It's because of the amount of trees, how dense the hectare is.
So you base it off the amount of trees that they have.
So I'm gonna introduce you to someone else here that's gonna join me. In a sec.
I want to see the worms.
She's properly wearing her mask, unlike me, so they can say they're safe from me. So let me switch this again. Can you see us both?
Hi, nice to meet you.
Hi.
So this is Loren. She is the mother of worms.
It sounds like a strange superhero name.
Yes,
Yeah.
and she runs this project, and she helps me run the farms as well, which is, I think, the only woman I know that actually runs a farm around here.
I think so.
I think so. So I'll let her show you the worms and tell you a little bit about what's going on. Yeah.
Awesome.
So right now we're harvesting. This is one of the tanks that we have. Can you see?
Oh, there you are. Okay.
Yeah. So this is the final product. You see, right now the cycle we had, it was 2 months, so that's why the tank is not full. This is when we're harvesting, and these are the worms, my babies. So I don't know if you can.
Huh.
Can you?
It's a lot more worms than my garden.
That's not being harvested yet.
So here, I think they're kind of shy.
I like the light.
They don't like the light and the heat. So we fill the tanks by layers, 10-inch by layer. So we have to treat the pulp for it to release the gases and to control the temperature, or it will kill the worms. So we treat it, and then we put it here, like I told you, in layers, and then we have to remove it for the worms to be eating constantly. Then when we control that layer and it's already finished, we put another one, and that's part of the cycle. Normally we close the cycle in 4 to 5 months. Now we're doing it in 2 months. So it's really helpful for us in the farms, because we apply this as a fertilizer, organic fertilizer. And the process is really simple. We fill it, and then when we need to have the worms, well, here we can see more. Okay.
Do you have names for all of them?
No, I'm not able to remember all. Just my babies, my girls. So do you see all these buckets that have the worms? We put like a tramp when the product is ready, so we can collect the worms and then put it again, like you can see in these tanks. Those are just the worms that are ready to fill with another layer of pulp, so they can start eating, and we're starting a new cycle, the second cycle of the year right now.
Can I ask a quick question? So
Yeah.
you just feed them
Anything else
straight
you'd like to
coffee
show them?
pulp?
What? Sorry.
Do you feed them just coffee pulp, or are
Yeah.
there other things you have to add to the solution, or is it just like
No,
coffee pulp
right
and
now
right
we're
temperature?
only using the pulp, because that was like the main thing, that the main goal was to be able to process the pulp that we had at the mill. Right now in the vermicompost project, the final goal is to be able to have different batches with different components and minerals. So we're trying to see how we can do that, to like have a batch of compost with a certain amount of potassium or different components. So when we need a specific thing in the soil, depending on the cycle of harvesting, we can apply it. So the planting will be like better, with a lot of nutritional components. So at the end, it will be a really good harvest, because we're trying to put everything that the plant needs in every moment that we know it needs.
Totally.
You want to show them how you pre-compose the pulp?
Yeah, sure.
What's that? I'm curious, besides the fact that you want to harness the nutrition to create better coffee,
Yeah.
What's the negative effect if you're just like disposed of all the coffee cherries? Like if you just threw it off the side of the volcano, would it have any negative impact on the environment, or?
No, actually it's the contrary. We are helping the soil to have more nutrition, more minerals, and be better, because it's an organic process. So
Yeah.
we're like, it's a closed cycle that we're heading. We have the pulp from the tree, and then from the plant, and then we put it again, processed by an organic thing.
But I was curious what they did with it before, like before it became compost. It's like a ton of coffee cherry.
Yeah,
what
that was
does
a
one
problem.
do?
There's a lot of people that use the pulp just as organic fertilizer without all of this, but the soil is this is better for the soul because it's quick. The soul can
The thing is that this is just one ingredient.
yeah,
This is just sugar. And once it
it's
goes through the
processed.
metabolism of
Yeah.
the worm, that makes it have other minerals
Present. Yeah.
So we don't want to be giving the plant just one element of nutrition. We actually want to have a balance. And every batch that you see once it's back like this, it's going to be sent to a microbiology lab, specifically at Anacape, which is to get it analyzed and tested for its mineral content. That's how it's going to work.
Nice.
So we call it the cakes. We turn the pulp and we put a little bit of water, and we have to extend it. And then in a few weeks, 1-2 weeks, it's ready to put in the tanks. So that's the first step. Then the second is in the tanks, and then that's the final product, as you can see.
That's awesome. Quite a production. And that's pretty crazy to get all of that nutrition harnessed in 2 months.
Okay. You guys have more questions for Lauren?
I think we covered it. Bill?
Okay.
Yeah, one question. Just one question. How does one become a worm wrangler? Like,
I don't know what's
you guys, I know this
she can hear you.
I know this is probably very normal on a farm, but to talk to somebody that professionally wrangles worms is not common.
It's like, how do you become the mother of worms?
Oh, that's like, I don't know. One day I was here and the owner said like, she's the queen of worms. And I was like, at that moment, I didn't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing. Now I just own the nickname though. I don't like it.
But yeah, well, she's good at it. She's an engineer, aside from it, so.
Engineer and worm wrangler.
Yes.
That's awesome.
So I think, I don't know, it just happened to her.
Yeah, I always like to work in open space. So when they showed me the worms, I was like, I'm not sure. But then I just had to grab it and touch it. And now I have to talk to them and tell them about my problem. So they're like my friends though.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And now what she does when we have like fancy visits is that the first thing she does is just, she grows a handful of them and just like, you gotta really touch them.
That's part of the experience though. You have to feel it and own it. It's like, I already touched a worm. My worms though. So yeah.
That's so good. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
I think you're my new hero. I'm just putting it out there.
Thank you.
I agree.
Next time I'll be wearing a capa.
A cape.
A cape.
Yeah.
Bye.
Well,
Bye.
let's see where you guys are at. Okay, should we keep on?
Yeah, well, do we have any questions before we? Nope, everyone's all good.
Everyone's all good?
Everyone's all good. I have a question for you though.
Yeah.
Well, you've covered a lot of things that I'm curious about, but I'd like to know what sort of coffee you drank today and how you're brewing it. Sorry, Bill and Jesse, you've heard me ask everyone this, but I'm very curious.
Well, before we jump subjects and before I forget,
okay.
One of the and I'm gonna keep speaking as we walk, if that's fine.
Yeah.
Because we have more stuff to see.
Oh, okay.
So before I forget, one of the very important things about this project is how we use the product. Because you know, we're at a point with the amount of pulp and the size of that facility that we are producing somewhere around 10 to 12,000 bags of dirt in a year. So a good portion of it we're selling to the guys that grow the organic vegetables here across the valley from us. And with some of that, what we're doing is that we're subsidizing the cost of this product so that we can sell it at below market price to people in our supply chain. So we actually use the minority of what we produce here in the farms, and everything goes out to the producers that we work with here on the volcano, in the Atitlan region, in Santa Rosa. Actually, one of the coffees that you have just landed right now, the Santa Cruz Naranjos, they received a significant portion of what we harvested last year. So just to put that out there.
Do you notice, have you noticed quality improvements from farms that have received the compost? Or is it too soon for that?
Not yet. I think we're gonna start seeing it in the next cycle or two, or the next harvest or two. Because this product has a companion, which is the other compost that we've spent the last 7 years developing, which we make at La Esperanza. You won't get to see that today, but that's actually the most advanced one because that's where we cultivate the microorganisms. And the one that I showed you here is mainly for the addition of minerals to the soil. So they go hand in hand, and like everything organic, you know, you don't see results within a week. It takes a couple months to see them.
Yeah.
And that's when we have to be like running a lot of analysis to know how to adapt back to what we need.
Josue, what's the life cycle of the organic fertilizer that you're composting today? Is that something that you look to rejuvenate every year, every few years, every month?
We're at a point that everything that we harvest is already assigned to someone. So we're working on capacity. We don't actually have any idle product. So right now, for example, I think mainly due to the crisis and the mobility around Guatemala, for the case of this particular harvest, we will use them here on the farm because it's available and it's here and we need it. But usually once we harvest it, we're immediately sending it out to Acatenango, we're sending it out to Huehuetenango. If it were the case that we needed to preserve it for a longer period of time, what we're gonna do is that we're gonna dry it and to lower the moisture and the microbial activity in it. Right now we harvest at about 30% moisture, and we wanna bring it down to around 20. So that makes it shelf stable, and at that point we can put it in a warehouse to somewhere between 3 to 6 months, and it's still gonna have a good amount of mineral components present. Not a lot of biodiversity, but mineral diversity. So the product is good regardless. It just depends how you finish it, depending on the use you're gonna give it.
It really just is unimaginable, the process in which you're going through to be able to support your producers and the producers that you're working with to obviously make sure that they're getting the best quality that they can get, to provide coffee to us. And it's just really amazing to see.
I call it a human-centered supply chain.
Yeah.
And if you guys are familiar with design thinking and principles behind the design of something, design and the design of a process or a product necessarily has to be thought around the people, around the person. And that encompasses whether they're here in the mountains, whether they're a farm or a small shareholder. The product, the system that I've tried to create is for them. It's based around them. But everything that we're doing here is also it's also human-centered, in the sense that it's also thought about the roaster that's going to be roasting this product. Now, if at this point these coffees are going to land in June, that means that these coffees are going to be roasted mainly during the winter and the spring. up to almost summer of next year. So that's a long shelf life.
Yeah.
And a lot of the decisions are for the well-being of the producer, but they are also thought about in terms of, you know, then the how we need to prepare the product, how we need to bring it about, so that by the time that it's in the hands of a roaster in the United States, it's not gonna taste like wood. It's not gonna taste like it aged before it had to. By the time it gets to the hands of a barista, if you know we did our work and it's within a certain specific density, it's going to extract within the parameters that you need. It's going to present the solubility you need for the blends or for the beverages you're trying to create. So it is very, you know, all encompassing in terms of what starts at the soil, how long it can reach.
Yeah.
So it's not only, you know, a matter of us like trying to take care of our supply chain on this end. We really have to think about the implications these decisions are going to have in the next 18 to 20 months.
Totally.
Spot on. Spot on. I agree.
We have
Okay.
we have a few more minutes left, so I think you should show us.
Let's show you this, and Stephanie's gonna help me. This is Stephanie, by the way.
Hi.
Filming is not her job. I call her our chief of staff, and her job is actually, she is the one that oversees like the execution of all our projects.
Nice.
And I just get to think about them now. I don't exactly get to get to be harassing anyone. She's the bad cop.
Yeah.
She's good at it. That's exactly what she is. She's the bad cop.
I don't envy her position.
Oh, she loves it. She
Okay.
As soon as I told her you're here to be the bad cop, she was like, I'm on board.
Perfect.
She actually used to be my attorney. She was my lawyer at a firm, and I went to steal her.
That's why I'm a good backup.
Yeah, that's why she's a backup, a good
Makes
backup.
sense.
Well, let's walk with me, because I think we're gonna show them back there. So can you still hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna stand behind her so I can kind of show them what these are. But maybe you start from over there and come towards me so they see like the whole line. Can you guys still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So what I'm about to show you here, it's a project that is in its infancy. And we already harvested our first cycle, and then I'm gonna show you what's next. But this project basically runs from over there, from the first tree, all the way down here to the wall. And it's a sliver of land. It's not the whole thing. It's from here where you're standing to this tree. It's basically a measure of land that is very commonly used in Guatemala, which is a manzana. This would be 1/16 of a manzana, which is roughly, a manzana is this size that we're seeing here, this land that you see here towards the back of me.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the average size of a farm of a small shareholder in Guatemala. So Guatemala, in its culture, in its history, is very deeply rooted in the Mayan culture. 76% of our population is of Mayan descent, and in their view of the world, their cosmovision, their cultural heritage, even in their book of creation, it's believed that men were made of corn. That's why they're called men of corn. And it's very deeply rooted to the point that it doesn't matter the size of a farm that you own, you will always have a plot of land that is dedicated to producing corn. In corn has the characteristic that it's a very vulnerable product. So if it has too much rain, if it doesn't have rain, if it has too much sun, if the volcano blows up, anything can spoil it. I mean, anything. And if and when they are able to produce, everyone has planted corn at the same time. So by the time it reaches market, it's worth nothing. And if you use it to feed yourself, you're basically having a nutrition that's mainly based on sugar and starch, because you grow the corn and below it you plant the beans. So it's that, chips and Coca-Cola, what everyone in Guatemala eats. So this project comes as an alternative, and when I say it's in its infancy, is because we're still experimenting with it and we're still trying to figure it out, to put it bluntly. Well, basically, this project, we call it Pilas, and it's an experimental plot that is meant to be so that a producer that has corn would give us a sliver of that space to create a multifaceted production system that is going to render for them, in our numbers, in the projections of this project, is nearly 18 times more profit per year, doing what we're trying to propose here, as opposed to planting corn. So you see that we have different rows of things, and this is different to how we actually execute it at farm level for small shareholders, because here is flat, and that's not the reality of everyone else. They're on slopes. So this is meant to be terraced. And the terracing it needs to be secured, needs to be prevented for erosion. So that's where all of these go. Everything that you see here, they're perennials. So we have, all the way from local spices that you probably have never seen before. We have different types of mints. This one we found growing on the volcano here, which ended up being fantastic for broth. That one as well, which they just call it rua. We don't exactly know a translation for it. We have spearmint. We have other type of local mints. We have the basil. Finally remember things in English. And we have rosemary, and then we have local spices. We already harvested some of the prettier ones, which are the edible flowers, because they are in season right now. And then, for example, this one that I have on my feet here, that's our native type of cilantro, which is very hard to find nowadays. It's called samat. And it's part of every single ceremonial dish that is part of the Guatemalan traditional cuisine. So this is one part of it. And let me show you first, and then I'll explain the whole picture. So this is meant to be on the slopes and be perennials and be something that is in constant production. And then the cycle that's coming, which is really what the project is about, it's a polyculture system that in this plot of land, we're able to grow 8 different cultures of different things. So for example, this is a good example. So we have the sweet peppers, we have the leeks, we have the onions, we have the lettuce, we have, this one's already been harvested, but these were cauliflowers. And then we have celery. Yeah.
So you take all of the idea is that it's sold in markets to increase the income to farmers if they set up companies.
So that's the brilliant part of it. So you see that the project is divided in 2 sides that are divided by this little road here. That's intentional, because this is the same way that I teach at La Esperanza about farming coffee. This place is where we're using to teach producers about the possibility of doing this. So one side is meant to be for food sovereignty, so that the family can actually eat it and use it and cook with it. And then the other side, part of the brilliant thing about this project is that we're basically creating the first farm-to-table movement in Antigua, Guatemala. And everything that we're farming and everything that we're going to farm and the amount of producers that we can involve is growing at a rate of how many chefs around town we have signed up for the project.
Wow.
So we have an out-of-market a value for it because it's organic and it's going to be organic everywhere else. We have a secure market. We're producing based on the lists that the cooks, the chefs are giving us based on what they're going to have in production for that cycle or the following cycles.
Mhm.
So we can procure, we can fulfill the procurement with planting for it, not buying for it. And they've been an integral part of it because when we launched the project, it was as an answer to what happened with the volcano explosion 2 years ago. They were very involved in the sense that they came here and we were able to get like all the mothers in the community to join us. And they came here to give a demonstration for them to know how to cook, the kale, how to use the leaves, how to properly use a lettuce so that a child would eat it. Because, some of these kids have never eaten a lettuce. So it's been a very reciprocating thing in terms of giving a new dimension to local, especially local hospitality, with product coming from local farmers here, mainly on the volcanoes, which is our neighborhood, immediate neighborhood, the one that we're trying to impact immediately. But right now, with everything closed down, we don't know exactly what the future of this project is going to be. We're speculating that tourism in Antigua is going to be about maybe 15 to 20% over the next 18 months of what it used to be. So the scaling of this project right now, it's obviously at a standby. But I see it as a good thing because it's gonna give me time to actually finish figuring it out and actually perfecting it before we actually start involving the producers and asking them to invest their time in it. Eventually, the way that it was designed, the size, the amount of crops, was so that if one crop dies, you still have another 7. If you're able to harvest half of it, it will still provide for your family to eat, and it will still provide for one monthly wage, as if for one family member, as if you were making Guatemalan minimum wage in a formal employment. So it's kind of a big deal. And the perennials by themselves are something extra. So only the perennials would, in theory, give you the rent of about 3 harvests of corn in a year. So the celery, for example, we don't plant celery because of celery itself, but we have a Belgian chef here in town that buys it for the root. Apparently the root is super important for French cuisine. And like that, all of these might seem like simple things, but the way that they get used are different, and that's why they have more value. So I just wanted to show you this because it's kind of new, and this is kind of something that we haven't shown anyone else. It's still in its developing phase. It's still in its infancy. But if it were to work, I think that in a couple of years we could have, I don't know, I'd say a couple hundred people involved at least.
It's amazing.
I think that's
So
super cool. And
with the producers we have now involved, we have no capacity to sell to anyone else. we're servicing four full restaurants, and that's it. And we wouldn't need to involve at this point another 50 to be able to grow another hotel or another restaurant.
That's great, man.
Yeah, I know. I love the diversifying. It seems so sustainable. It seems to be like a positive thing for the community. Yeah, really, and a lot healthier than Coca-Cola and chips.
Yeah. And the last part that I might not have mentioned is that here, like for example, this is cubic meter. Basically, per cubic meter, we need to use 8 pounds of our compost soil.
Mm-hmm.
So if this project were to take hold, that's also one of the reasons why we need to increase our production and our population of worms for us to have enough for everyone. The idea is that we as a country have gone through many changes, and our supply chain has suffered with it. And we at some point as an exporter were among the leaders in the exports of organic certified coffee. That's no longer the case because there's a lot of communities that have lost their certification, or some areas that had just been abandoned because those producers are in the United States now. So my commitment was, well, obviously modeling the farms to what it could be in terms of organic agriculture. And the producers that I want to get involved, I want to show them first what it can be, and we're willing to develop it from scratch. So by the point in time that we're able to be producing another 10 containers of organic certified coffee, I want to be able to produce all the things that they're going to need, all the fertilizers, all the products, and have the intel on how to utilize it properly. And it's, you know, something that we will see in about 5 to 10 years. That's when we'll know. But in the meantime, you know, it's I'm convinced that we're making a good investment in trying to develop these things.
I think when you use the word
absolutely.
sustainability, that's like the definition of sustainability at the farm level, to be able to diversify the income, not only just for coffee, but to do it in a way that you're doing it so it could be for the long haul rather than.
So sustainability is a term of the past now. Now it's circular economy.
Circular economy. Okay.
I like that.
Mark
Yeah.
my words. Next time at symposium, someone's gonna come up with it, and everyone's gonna be like, "Oh my God, it's the new thing." Fortunately, I
writing it
won't be there for
down.
that.
There's no more SCA.
There's no more SCA. SCA is also a thing of the past.
That's I have that on tape. I'm just saying.
Well, listen, if anyone can say that, it's me. So
Yeah.
we're cool.
Keep your comments to yourself.
Yes, I'm not using Royal to, you know, voice my opinions.
No. But it doesn't matter.
No, well, no, I can do that in person.
Well, I
But well,
hope
I
we
don't.
get to see you in person sometime.
Are there any other questions, guys, or anything that you think that we might have left out?
Can you come set up my garden?
Well, maybe.
Soon.
But where's your garden in Long Island?
Yes. So come visit New York. We'll go to Royal, and then you can come stay at my house and, you know, build my garden.
I wish you would have said like upstate, because I would have been on that, man.
Yeah.
Come on, I'll take you surfing, man.
It's cool. And then you stop by my garden because we're not that far apart from each other.
There you go. See, that two jobs,
you know,
just like that.
Yep.
Actually, we talked about this with Richard when he was here, and we were wondering if the idea would fly to have like an educational series here at farm level about farming. Because, you know, you see, you know, everyone trying to come up with new ways to ferment and new ways to dry coffee and whatever. But, you know, I always tell producers, mainly producers, 90% of whatever you're going to get in the end starts in the soil.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, why not specifically learn about that, and as opposed to be trying to make magic happen with yeasts or whatever, you know? It's like, let's start from the basic.
Oh,
I'd be fascinated by that. I don't know anything about soil. I don't know nearly enough, for sure.
Well, Brooklyn Botanical Gardens has some good seminars on composting. Just putting it out there, Bill.
I want to be taught by the guy that said SCA is over. Okay,
yeah,
that's the guy I want.
I was just saying the precursor to that, you know.
And you get to hang out with the mother of worms, and
yeah. See, I mean, that ain't happening in Brooklyn. So
you get to be bossed around by Stephanie.
There you go. The bad cop.
And Bill, you know that Guatemala is like the untapped surfing world. Central America.
That is true.
It's all coming together. It's all coming together. Just got to get rid of this whole pandemic thing.
Yeah, Bill, can you just make it end? Can you just end it for us?
I'll take care of that. Don't worry. Just give me a little time. I'm on it.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
I think that's a great idea, though. I think that, yeah, I am all for more education on all levels. And however that can be supported community-wise. And yeah, I think what you're doing right now is awesome in terms of education for your community. I'd love to help to make that flourish even further.
Well, this is how we do it. We tell everyone.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think we need a round 2, maybe in a few weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A little bit more
Well,
promotion, and we could
Well,
get more people involved.
we should do that one from the volcano or something. Is there signal on the volcano?
Yes.
No, there's no signal on the volcano.
That's so high
Then
up.
we'll do it from we'll do it from La Esperanza then.
Yeah, maybe the mill. Show the mill,
Yeah.
and
I also think I'm going to probably send you an email in a little bit, because I'd love to capture some of the stuff that we talked about and like put it in a blog format, because I think it's really valuable and interesting information.
Okay.
So,
By
if
the
you
way,
don't mind.
wasn't Dan supposed to be on this call?
what happened to him? I think
I have
he's
no
working on
idea.
my extensive traceability questionnaire.
Yeah.
I just realized it's like, wasn't Dan supposed to join?
He's enjoying his cats and eating vegan, I think, right now. So
I don't even know if he's watching. Dan, are you out there? I don't think so, right?
he's not
No,
out there.
Yeah.
no,
Well,
but
You're-
we'll bother him later.
next time. Next time.
Yes, next time. Josue, I'll talk to you later. I got to sign off, but thank you. I appreciate it.
Hey,
Good to
guys.
see everybody.
Good
I'm
to
in
see you
the
too.
same boat, but it was really been a pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, guys.
Thank you.
Bye. You want to say goodbye?
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.